Then, like I say, if you want.
Yes.
Please,
Am I on? It may be muted. Am I muted?
give it just a second.
Oh, there I am on.
Please, you're invited to come forward.
Can you hear me?
Come have a seat. Grab a cup of coffee, come sit down, please. Eileen Gathman is the chaplain at St. Paul's School for Girls, the school that we're connected with that is in Brooklandville. And you've been there 5 years?
This is my fifth year, I know.
That is great. So
It's hard to believe.
Eileen at various moments. Her husband is a pastor.
Yes, he's the pastor at Chestnut Grove Presbyterian Church, way up in the county. Four Corners, if you're familiar with the area.
And so in talking to Eileen, I just wanted her to come and share some of her gifts and her passions. So let me turn it over to Eileen.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, so can you all hear me? Okay, this is a microphone. Are you hearing me though? Not well.
No, you speak a little louder and it'll pick it up.
Okay, I'll speak a little louder. Good morning. Thank you so much for having me. I am really excited to be here, and what an incredible opportunity. Mark, thank you. For many years, I grew up hearing about women in the Bible, mostly Mary. I grew up in a Roman Catholic tradition, and we honored Mary quite a bit. But even her story was really only told through a male lens and through the male interpretation, through clergy. I was taught to revere Mary for her faithfulness, and yet there was never much discussion about her story. And I have found myself, as I've grown older, really connecting with the idea of story. We all have a story to tell. We all have lived experiences. We are more than just the one thing that people seem to remember us for, right? Mary, was a person like me, enfleshed, living a human experience. And so I thought it might be helpful for us to consider some of the stories of other women in the Bible. And I am recognizing that today is March 1st, and this is, if you are not aware, Women's History Month. And so maybe in a momentous time, when Mark invited me, I don't know, back in October or so, we looked at the calendar, and this is the date where we landed. So perhaps we can learn together a little bit about some other women in history, our ancestral women. I wanted to share a few things. One is a really tiny book that I have found to be a helpful little resource. And this is just a Catholic woman, Sister Joan Chittister. Her, again, super tiny, Friendship of Women, and really highlighting and letting us elevate a bit some of the stories that we rarely hear in our day-to-day. I also wanted to hand out a few readings that I think sort of situate us a bit. And so maybe see if there's enough for everyone. I'm hoping maybe, and maybe some of us can share. I spend my days with 500 preteen and teenage girls, and so I appreciate your attentiveness and acceptance. Are we good? Will there be enough, I hope? So we're going to start with a woman who, when I first learned her story, and I need to say it was not until I was an adult that I first learned the story of Ruth. And that's kind of my point, right? We don't hear these stories. So we're going to just take a little look at Ruth's story, and I wonder if there's anyone. My class is not a lecture kind of situation. I'm a participation kind of person. So I'm wondering if there's anybody who, now it says on, but there's no light. Okay. Is there anyone who might be comfortable reading? A couple of people down. Thank you. What is your name? Winter. Thank you.
Ruth, chapter 1, verses 15 to 19. So she said, "See, your sister-in-law has gone back to her people and to her gods. Return after your sister-in-law." But Ruth said, "Do not press me to leave you or to turn back from following you. Where you go, I will go. Where you lodge, I will lodge. Your people shall be my people, and your God my God. Where you die, I will die. There will I be buried. May the Lord do thus and so to me, and more as well, if even death parts me from you." When Naomi saw that she was determined to go with her, she said no more to her. So the two of them went on until they came to Bethlehem. When they came to Bethlehem, the whole town was stirred because of them. And the women said, "Is this Naomi?"
Thank you. All right, so what observations do we see in this text? We know this is a story about Ruth. There are a few other people named in the text. What other observations do we see? Yeah, Naomi, her mother-in-law. Yes. Correct, yes. She is not an Israelite. Yep. There's a whole town involved. Yeah. Yes. There is a sister-in-law. It's interesting, this Old Testament class that I teach is a 6th grade collection of students, and you might be surprised to know that they are very familiar with the concept of a mother-in-law. I ask them not to share any of their personal stories because I'm quite sure their families don't want them to know. I myself have an amazing mother-in-law. My mom did not. Her mother-in-law, my grandma, was a horrible woman, and everybody agreed with that. But it is interesting how these 6th grade students are already tuned into their families enough to know that the mother-in-law is a thing. So what do we notice about Ruth and her mother-in-law? What is happening? She wants to stay with her. Did the other sister-in-law stay with her? No. No, she went back to her people. Ruth decides to be faithful, loyal to her mother-in-law and return to her mother-in-law's land. Now, who is missing from this story? We're hearing a woman, her sister-in-law, and her mother-in-law. Who are we not hearing about? Any of the men, right? So perhaps you're sitting there looking at this text and you might be wondering, well, what happened to their spouses? It began with Naomi's husband passing away. Shortly thereafter, the sister-in-laws, Ruth and Orpah is the sister-in-law, their spouses pass away. And if you know anything about women in the ancient world in particular, their hope for a future was really wrapped up into their ability to own land, to identify with the head of household in that time and place was the man. And so we have an older woman and two, let's call them young to middle-aged women, without any hope for a future, without any hope for owning land. They turn. They're at this moment where they can make a decision. Naomi, being the sweet woman that she is, says, go back to your lands. You're young, you have a chance. Remarry with your people. Orpah says, all right, I'll go, thank you. But not Ruth. Ruth is determined to stay with her mother-in-law. She is turning away from what opportunity seems to be for her. She stays with this woman. How does that sit with you?
Thank you. I've always wondered what Ruth's motivations are here. Is she going with Naomi because she cares for Naomi and she doesn't see who is going to care for Naomi if I abandon her? Or is she going with Naomi because she doesn't see a future for herself back in her hometown? Maybe she's got family that she's trying to escape from. I just have always wondered, what is Ruth's motivations and why does she see her future being better staying with Naomi?
It doesn't seem that a future would be for either of them. Why do they think it might be better if they are together? Okay?
Mother-in-law that really made a positive impact in her. And as we see the persistence, and there's something special about her mother-in-law that she doesn't want to part ways with her. And maybe she felt like she was the daughter who would help take care of her at some point. So it's very motivating.
Yeah, good, thank you. Does the language of this particular passage sound familiar to you? Have you heard it in any other contexts? Through song. This passage is at times read at weddings. Where you go, I'll go. Your people will be my people. Your God will be my God. Where you live, I will live also. Kind of a misuse of that passage, right? When you think of it in that way. This is not a romantic pledge of loyalty. This is an honoring. A woman who is of a different cultural and religious tradition is pledging her loyalty to her mother-in-law. And not just her mother-in-law, to her mother-in-law's people, her mother-in-law's God. Again, I go back to those of us who have a mother-in-law. This may or may not resonate with you, and if it does, then God bless it. And if it doesn't, then wow, this feels maybe a little bit shocking. Ruth's story We're kind of situating ourselves around the year 1200 before the Common Era. All right? They are coming, somebody mentioned, from different religious and cultural traditions. This is different from her husband's family. The three of these women have this shared experience of being widowed together. She pledges her loyalty to her mother-in-law and returns with Naomi's family to the land of Naomi's family. She adopts the customs and the traditions and the practices of this new land. One of the things that comes from this story, and we didn't read this particular part of the passage, is that as Ruth returned to the land which of Naomi's people, she ends up meeting someone who is a distant relative of Naomi. Long story short, they end up getting together and they marry, and they together, he says, you are better than 7 sons would have been to Naomi. She's more loyal, more faithful than 7 sons would have been. We see in Ruth's story the power of patience, waiting to see how God's promise would be fulfilled in her life through a very twisted road, right? Ruth becomes the great-grandmother of King David, and she is one of the women who is even named in Jesus' genealogy. So, when have you had to be patient for something in your life? When have you had to be patient in your life? So many times. Yeah, children, aging parents.
I mean, just speaking to the sermon today, the whole thing where you can't control people, that you're patient every day.
Right.
Like any time that you're interacting with a person, you're generally having to, qualify your expectations with how other people act, and even
Yeah.
whether you're conscious of it or not. It's like right now we're all patient, sitting here listening.
Yes. Yeah.
It's just depending on what you're doing, what patience is.
Yeah.
I think we have to be patient with illness and disability.
No. Do you want to add to that?
Hate, prejudice, bigotry, misogyny, racism. There are a lot of things.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you.
It blends in well with today's message about the Spirit blows where it chooses. And I feel like in Ruth's case, the Spirit was blowing in her direction and she was chosen for a reason. And there was a spirit in her that was keeping her to be very adamant and to tell her mother-in-law, I'm going where you're going. So there was a spirit speaking in her. As we, if you read deeper and how it ties with King David and, the birth of our Christ.
Yes. Have you, in your lives, have you yourselves experienced God's divine leading and providence, ways that you can speak to? That you might want to share. Have you experienced God's divine providence and leading in your life? Yeah. Love it. Yes.
God works in very mysterious ways. And I think it is a relationship that it's very unique for each person with God. And it's something that cannot be taught. It's something that spirituality, finding a way of communicating with God. And God can communicate with you in different ways. There are people who can visualize things. There are people who can just even see a butterfly, and that's through God communicating with you. And I think once you learn how to hear that voice, that's the spirit, like the voice from God. And once you learn how to listen to that voice, and in being that communication with Him, I think it's a powerful thing and very transformative. And it's something that I've witnessed in my life, throughout my life for all these years I've had. And it's something that even through the Lent season, this is one of those seasons that you get having that intimacy with God in various ways. Yep.
It's more of a question.
Yeah.
Because I'm just curious, in a book filled with mostly male perspective, what difference does it make to you that these are women who are the heroes, who are the models? I just personally, I'd be curious what it means to you.
Yeah. Personally, for me.
Yeah.
In this particular story, it is, I think, so important that her story, Ruth's story, be told. That we allow women's stories to be told. And I think that's part of, for me, in my own development as a human being and my own journey of faith, it has meant everything when I've been given opportunities to have my story told, to let my story be told in light of God's mercy in particular. And one of the pieces for me how I would answer seeing God's divine providence, I was born in Bogota, Colombia. I was adopted into a family, grew up on Long Island, moved to Lewisburg, Pennsylvania, where I met my husband, who I had no idea. We were in high school. He was winking at me over his choir folder. We ourselves got married and moved to Maryland, and were unable to have children, and we adopted. And our story leans into this as God continued to call us into ministry. I can't not see God's divine providence in my own story and leading. And so even if I tried to find a way out, it has not been possible for me. So I think it's important that we allow women's stories to be told. Yeah, thank you. I do want to be conscious of time. Oh, yeah, go ahead. Because I think we have a perspective, we bring an entire other side of humanity that when we only see one side, when we only hear one side, there is so much missing. There's a gap, there's an emptiness. Yeah.
Okay, so I'm going to dive in again because I'm really glad you asked that question about why. And I think what I've lived through is a patriarchal society, which if you'd asked me, when I was 15 or 20, I would have shrugged and said, I don't know, what does that mean? And then, of course, I went into the work world. And what I have seen over time is representation is critical. I had male and female coworkers and managers, bosses, supervisors. And I will say that I learned so much from both male and female. But if I hadn't had the female, and they weren't all good, I don't want to say that. I had crummy male and female managers and good ones. But the lessons I learned were equally important from male and female. And they were very different kinds of lessons. But I feel really fortunate to have had people paving the way. My first news director when I was working for NBC was a woman, and she sort of nudged me and said, you want to dress for the job you want, not the job you have. You know, you want to, I don't know, you know, she was very quietly mentoring all of the women in that office. And to this day, I can name her and others who the men weren't doing that. So I think when we see this, we can sort of say, this woman found something and followed it.
I think too, as you were talking, I was also just thinking about how it's important for women to know, it's important for people to know that God speaks to all genders, right? That God is not only working through men in the world. That God is not only revealing God's self to the men in our society and throughout history. And that's why I think it's important that we tell the women's stories. Yeah. Yes, well, thank you for clarifying. I get lost in my head sometimes. I want to jump to the next story. We're probably not going to get through all these. I selected 4, but let's just jump to the next one. On the back, and we have another woman who, again, I did not know much of this story until I was an adult. Is there anyone who would feel brave to read this passage aloud for us? It is, yes, I'm sorry, the story of Esther. Thank you.
Now Mordecai gave Esther's attendant Hathach a copy of a written decree issued in Susa for his people's destruction, that he might show it to Esther, explain it to her, and charge her to go to the king and make supplication to him and entreat him for their people. Hathach went and told Esther what Mordecai had said. Then Esther spoke to Hathach and gave him a message from Mordecai, saying, all the king's servants and all the king's provinces know that if anyone goes to the king inside the inner court without being called, there is but one law. All alike are to be put to death. Only if the king holds out the golden scepter to someone, may that person live. I myself have not been called to come into the king for 30 days. When they told Mordecai what Esther had said, Mordecai told them to reply to Esther, do not think that in the king's palace you will escape any more than all the other Jews. For if you keep silence at such a time as this, relief and deliverance will rise for us from another quarter. But you and your family's family will perish. Who knows? Perhaps you have come to royal dignity for just such a time as this. Then Esther said in reply to Mordecai, go, gather all our people to be found in Susa, and hold a fast on my behalf, and neither eat nor drink for 3 days, night or day. I and my maids will also fast as you do. After that, I will go to the king, though it is against the law, and if I perish, I perish. Mordecai then went away and did everything as Esther had ordered him.
Thank you. Okay, we have Esther. Who else is in our story? Mordecai. The king. people. Mm-hmm. And what are we noticing? What is happening in this story? Using a servant to pass the message. What message?
That the Jewish people will be put to death. And so she is being tasked with making a plea.
Perhaps if you're familiar with this text, you're maybe thinking of Haman. Yes, Mordecai is Esther's relative who actually adopted and raised her. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, the Jewish people are at risk here. Their entire people are being threatened. There's some backstory and history here in this context, but in our story, just to see where Esther is in this moment, she herself is a Jewish woman married to a Gentile king. Her own identity is not yet revealed. Mordecai, her cousin, her relative, knows that there's been a plot to annihilate the Jewish people. And he makes her aware of it. And he says, you have to say something. And of course, you can imagine Esther is perhaps a bit fearful, right? Unless the golden scepter is held out, no one is allowed to go and speak to the king. My students don't understand, by the way. You mean she can't go and talk to her own husband unless a golden scepter is held out for them, you know? Yeah. Yeah. Even Esther, his queen, cannot go and speak, is putting her life at risk to go and speak to the king. She hears Mordecai's encouragement, though. Relief is going to come from somewhere, right? And she says, if I go, I may perish. He says, who knows but that you were here, placed in this moment, for this time, for this purpose. She does it. She goes. She goes and speaks to the king. And because of the nuance of law and legalities, if any of you are lawyers here, perhaps you understand the king cannot undo the edict, but he can change the consequence, meaning that after she speaks to her king, he says, I will allow for the Jewish people to defend themselves. I will no longer make it so that they are just annihilated. They will now be able to defend themselves. So, again, placing our story in context here, this is about the year between 450 and 500 before the Common Era. She is a Jewish woman living in Persia. This is after the exile. She's an orphan raised by her relative Mordecai. Haman was mentioned. Haman was the chief official in King Ahasuerus' court, and he was the one who had said, "We must annihilate the Jewish people." Right? Exceptionally anti-Semitic. He was thinking about, when should we do this? They cast lots, which was at that time a practice known as pur, and they determined the date would be March 7th, what we consider March 7th. The remembrance of Esther's story is still celebrated today in the Jewish communities. It is known as Purim. It is actually, this year, it falls on tomorrow, March 2nd. Esther breaks code. She approaches the king. She speaks on behalf of her people. She bravely is willing to put her life at risk, shares her Jewish identity, and asks for King Ahasuerus to allow her people to defend themselves. What are your thoughts at this point, at this moment, about Esther, about that culture? Yeah.
Well, I was going to say, it
Thank you.
sucks to be Esther, because it's not like this beautiful love story between her and the king. If I recall correctly, she was plucked out of a harem of many, many women, and so essentially she's a young sex slave to the king, and I mean, that's awful. So she's been placed in this terrible situation, and then on top of that is being asked to sort of stand up as the savior for her people. So it's sort of, it's a doubly bad situation, right? It's not as if, to your point about your students, my darling husband, I have this problem we need to solve. It's, I've been abused and mistreated, and now I'm going to put myself on the line. Mm-hmm. Not a great situation.
Yeah. Thank you. So, King Ahasuerus had been married previously. Queen Vashti refused to be paraded around for King Ahasuerus's people. And so she left. He removes her, and Esther goes through a few years of beauty treatments and whatnot, and is chosen to be, she's now allowed to be the new queen. So yes, thank you for sharing some of that aspect of the story. Other thoughts? Yeah.
I think it's still about today's message. The Spirit blows where it chooses. And here again, we see the same picture being portrayed. And just an interpretation on Esther's story. It's a very powerful story in a way. And I think she was chosen to be able to save a people, to help deliver a people. And, she's my baptismal mother. So that's my baptismal name.
Wonderful. Someone else have? Are all risks good? No. She takes this risk very prayerfully, yes. We talk to our students about taking healthy risks, right? Balancing or weighing the consequences of something. Perhaps, jumping out of an airplane feels like a healthy risk for some. For others, it feels ridiculous, right? And for some, it's not a healthy risk. Can you think of a time when you yourself have taken a healthy risk?
Risk I took was leaving Kenya for the first time, boarding a plane, coming to America. I'd never been outside the country, so when I came for my undergraduate studies at Thomas More University in Kentucky, so being the first in our entire family to leave the country, and by then I didn't have a phone, so we didn't have even how to communicate. They had no idea. Where's the United States? Did she arrive there safely?
Is she okay?
Yeah, so it took almost 4 months for them to hear from me that I arrived. So having that faith, they held the faith on their end. I held my faith on my end, and I said, I have faith that we will connect again.
Yeah.
And when I get to the land of the United States of America, I have faith that I'll find a way of communicating with you again. So that was a huge risk.
Yes, yes. In our class setting, I have the students journal on these questions. And they keep a journal through middle school, through their middle school religious studies classes. And it's important to do that. My rationale for doing that is to place themselves in the story. And I think it's important even for us as adults, as we read, to place ourselves in the story. Where might we fall? With whom do we identify ourselves? Are we doing on time? Is it time? We're just about out of time. Okay. Keep the packet. Spend some time learning a little bit about these two women from the New Testament, from John's Gospel, unnamed women as they may be, still two stories that are remarkable and whose faith, actually, when we were praying that last prayer during the service today, where was that? That they bear witness. Do you remember where that was, Mark? To do the work you have given us to do, to love and serve you as faithful witnesses of Christ our Lord. And so those two women, think as you read, consider their stories as they too bear witness to Christ. Yes.